Hi, this is Dr. Teresa A. Smith, Dr. TAS, and welcome to this episode of Talk with TAS. Today I have with me Colette Harrell. Colette Harrell. And I want to say that I have been enjoying getting to know Colette off camera. She is a dynamic individual who has a very complex mind. And she takes what should be simple and she just weaves stories. She writes international thrillers. And if you're a fan of thrillers, you're going to really be a fan of her thrillers because, she just makes the world of fiction come alive to you. And so I am so honored to get to share her with you guys. So I'm just going to tell you, get ready for a conversation that's maybe going to shift your mindset and maybe even your future, because we don't know what later is going to bring us. But if you're chasing different, this is the time that you need to tune in. So let me make sure I slow it down. Welcome, author Colette Harrell, to talk with TAS. I've got so many things in my brain, but Talk with TAS. How are you doing today?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I see how you did that. And if people don't know, the book before Chasing Different is Later. So when she talked about later, and then she talked about Chasing Different, she was talking about both of my books. And just a plug, Later is on sale now for 99 cents. And then my newest book that characters are from later are in this book is Chasing Different, Fitting In, has a price. And so I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And let's have a party, literary party.
Well, we're going to kick this party off. We are in a world that's full of a lot of negativity right now, a lot of fear. How can your story serve as a spiritual fuel to help people kind of rise above what's going on, all this noise that we're dealing with?
Actually, in the book, I talk about that because I believe that for every negative thing that happens in the world, God has already put out there the remedy. He has already provided the solution to whatever problem you have. And so when we are going through, when things are happening in the world, and this talks a lot about the powers to be and how sometimes all the time, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so one of the things that we give here is that we still have people who are on the right side, doing the right thing, pushing forward. So there will always be workmen in the vineyard. They will always be a ram in the bush. God will always provide a window if the door closes. And promotion only comes from God. So understand that things that are happening in the natural are being countered in the spiritual. We just have to look for that open door, that open window, that way out, that ram in the bush.
Now, you just preached a sermonette there. Guys, let me see if I can capture it real quick before it's gone from me. Things that are happening in the natural, they're being countered in the supernatural, in the God realm. And that's really, because what she just did was, guys, explain also that ram in the bush. Now, we know that when Abraham, and you correct me, because sometimes my scripture stuff will kind of blend together. When Abraham took Isaac up to be slaughtered, and he put him on, I'm gonna call it the table, that rock, that flat rock, whatever, and he was gonna slay him. Then God said, "What you doing?" Because his son, him and Sarah, they done gone through a whole lot to get Isaac. The ram was in the bush.
The ram was in the bush, and what put the ram in the bush was faith.
Oh, come on, get that.
Because he needed to see Abraham's faith activated. And why is that? Because before Isaac, there was Ishmael.
Mm-hmm.
And Ishmael always comes before Isaac. God will make you a promise, and we will try to, in our natural habitat, make that promise come in our time.
Oh, yes.
And God wants us to wait on the Isaacs
Mm-hmm.
in our lives and not move with Ishmael, because Ishmael's going to cost. Abraham loved his son, Ishmael, but he ended up having to allow Ishmael to go.
Go away.
Because there is a cost to disobedience.
Ooh,
when he shifted into faith and said, come on, Isaac, when he shifted into understanding what he had to do to be into God's presence and to finally have God say, now I hear you doing the right thing. Now I see who you are. He had to take Isaac up to that mountain. And when he got up there, just the act, I don't know when the ram got in the bush. This is the fantastic thing. Did the ram get in the bush when he said, come on, Isaac? Did the ram get in the bush when they started climbing the mountain? Did the ram get in the bush when he put his head, was ready to put him on the altar? When did the ram get in the bush? All we know was that the ram was placed in the bush. And it's similar to the wine, the water being turned into wine. You don't know when it got turned into wine. We know faith activated the water.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I like to say, and this may sort of tie into later for those who like this sort of thought process. I always say that when we petition God with the faith, because it had to be faith to activate it, as you said with Abraham, he dispatches the ram in the bush. He dispatches the blessing. But when time and destiny meet, so now I'm talking about later, because you see, we in the flesh, we in this earthly realm, but he's sending something from heaven. And so when heaven's blessing, because we praise and blessings flow down, when that comes together, then we see it. So, and I never thought about that as far as Isaac and the ram in the bush, because he was walking in faith. Now, he was not being disobedient, because see, they had been disobedient, him and Sarah, and that's how we got Ishmael.
Yeah, because Sarah was part of it. Sarah sent in the servant, but go ahead.
I'm a woman and I love a woman, but she was staying in her place. And they say a woman got to stay in her place. They say a man got to stay in her place too, his place too. But this particular time, she should have stayed in her place. But it's a lesson for us all these centuries later. Trust God. And so that brings me to, how do your stories remind readers that resilience and light still have the final say? Because in using this particular example, God still had the final say.
I think that for most of us, when we are in the struggle, it is sometimes difficult to remember who's really in charge. And I think in 2025, many of us are struggling with that right now, with the powers to be. And just to be real and authentic, many of us wonder where the ram in the bush is. And I even have to remind myself that God is still on the throne. Yes. And so when I go back to another thing, reason why you hear us talking a lot about spiritual things, and we're talking a lot about biblical things and verses and books. And my books are inspirational. And the reason why I don't label them as Christian, because I authentically talk about real life in my books. And that can offend some people based on whatever level or whatever denomination they may be in. My books are not sexually explicit or anything like that. But I do authentically talk about the life that I know we're all leading. And I also talk about the flaws that we have as people, even as Christians. And so I think it's important for us to remember that in the midst of our divinity, there's humanity, and that we have to actually deal with everyday issues. We can pray but you're going to put food on the table by going out and working. So you can't sit home and say, I'm praying about it. No, you need to go get a job if you're able,
Yes.
right? And God knows that. God knows if you're not able, and God puts that ram in the bush, as we said. But I think that for a lot of people, we have to work our faith. Faith without works is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are things that we're actually supposed to do to make certain things happen. So when you talk about resiliency in my books, these are people who are flawed. These are people who have sometimes had flawed childhoods. And these are people who have walked through some fire. But I think the resiliency is showing them get through it. And some of these people, faith have been shaken. Some of them are not saved. Some of them are finding their way. And so I think that's important to show the progress. And because Chasing Different, plug, is a 3-book, the first book in a 3-book series, you're going to see all of these characters evolve over the 3 books. And you're going to see how God brings them into fullness and manifestation of who they're meant to be, because none of us are the first chapter in our own books.
No. And, Colette, I'm thinking about that secondary title for Chasing Different. Fitting in has a price. And I think sometimes that we're so driven to meet what society says is success, which has always been window dressing. But we're just driven to do that now because of social media, I believe. And we often find ourselves hero worshiping individuals that we see even on regular television now, but in social media. And so why is it important for people to see that strength rises from the imperfection, especially if they're broken themselves? Because when you're talking about fitting in has a price, if I'm broken, then how much, this may be poor English, guys, but you get what I'm saying. How much more broken must I become? How much must I um, downplay who I am in order to fit in to a particular group or a setting?
And we do it all too much. A lot of people do it all too much. We people please, and we recreate our personalities. Sometimes we make them extremely dull. We don't put the shine on. And other times we have the shine too high. We can be hyper in situations because we're trying to do what we see the group is doing. We try to be um, a person that the group leans towards. We want to be popular. And so when it says fitting in has a price, in this book, Chasing Different, every book, this is the Loving Different series. So in each book, the protagonist is different than what we consider in society the norm. So Deacon is neurodivergent. And so he talks too loud. He doesn't always pick up on social cues. He has some issues. And so he's seen as different. But he's learned not to try to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
But here is Nia, my female protagonist, who is not neurodivergent. However, she actually has used herself to make herself small to fit in. She's kind of my cowardly lion. So she has made herself pleasing to other people. She has placed herself in a place, in a box where she's acceptable to everyone. And so here's this man that's interested in her, and he is the complete opposite. But when the wheels hit the road, and she's in need, this different is the one that has the solution. So it's all about resiliency. It's all about accepting people for who they are and where they are. And it's also about that, a lot of women have these lists of what a man has to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if he doesn't fit the list, he doesn't get the phone number, he doesn't get the first date. And this is also about your list being flawed.
Mm.
This is not about settling. This is about your list being flawed. And maybe the characteristics on your list for that special someone need to be reevaluated. And so chasing different is all about being inclusive in terms of not feeling like your yardstick for who you find valuable in the world is the correct yardstick. I like when God said a long time ago to me, change your measuring stick, right? Don't use society's or the world's measuring stick. Use my measuring stick for who you have in your circle, for who you want to include in your world, because my measuring stick has the characteristics of godly people on it.
I like that because I agree. I always say that I don't use other people's barometer to measure who I am.
That's
And
good.
that's what he's saying. So then that leads me to my next question. Some people feel like they're disqualified because you talk about those two protagonists in the book. The deacon who kind of diminished, well, he pulled back, well, he learned how to modulate himself. But then the young lady, she didn't have any challenges. And so she diminished herself, though, in order to fit in. So, what would you say to people who maybe have their past, who believe that their past disqualifies them from, I'm going to say, a fruitful or hopeful future? How can your books help them to understand that their past doesn't define their future?
Well, I think what's wonderful is that we can just go to the Bible. There's nobody in the Bible God used that wasn't flawed.
Mm-hmm.
There is not one person that he came and brought to the front, even the lineage of Jesus, they were all flawed. David was an adulterer and a murderer.
Yes.
If you continue to look at everyone that he used people that already had gone through something. So then they had their experience allowed them to be better equipped to handle what God was going to take them through. See, I know I can use you because you already been through some things and you still standing.
Yes.
See, I know that you're the person that I want because you were bold when nobody stood with you. I can use you. Noah, you can build the ark because you ain't allowed folk to tell you who you are and what to do. They're going to laugh at you about this boat you building, but you a man that doesn't allow laughter to stop you. So he uses those paths and those things that we have gone through to actually select you and position you for your assignment.
That's another word that you done dropped there. I can use you because you stood boldly when no one stood with you. And, I think about something I said to a group of students last week. I didn't say it exactly like this, but leadership means you've got to be able to intrinsically motivate yourself. Because when you're actually acting in a leadership role, whether it's in an organization, whether it's on your job, whether it's in the community or within your family or with yourself, you're not always going to have people standing in agreement with you. And if you are the type of person who needs that admiration, you need people to say, yes, I think that's a great job. Let's just keep going forward. You're not going to be able to navigate the currents that come with leadership, because being able to be bold, and as you just said, all of those things that you've gone through. So if you're feeling that you're disqualified, no, that was actually his way of qualifying you for what is to come. But Abraham, you're going to have to not be disobedient. You're going to have to fall into formation, as Beyonce would say, and activate your faith so that you can be positioned and refined for the role that I have called you to play in my world, whether you're in this galaxy or you in later. You might be in later, you might be chasing. I don't know which one you're in right now, but wherever you at, y'all get the book, get the book. You're gonna have to go through these steps in order to feel secure in yourself, in order to navigate what's going to be your future, but it's going to eventually be your present.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard thing to get into. When I think about how you weave these thrillers that are inspirational, they do entertain, but they're not just for entertainment now, guys. They really are entertaining. So get the book. It's got special rating. But for someone who feels empty, they either just empty or they say, I'm spiritually empty. What message does your stories help to reignite? Let me say it differently. How can your stories help to reignite that fire that they need to fill up their tank so that they can keep going?
I think if you read between the lines, I think it's important. My book is not full of scripture. It is not where you pick it up and chapter 2 begins with Psalms, 28. No, it's actually within the formation of the book. There's a line in there where Nia asked Deacon, because Nia is a Christian, and Nia asked Deacon, do you pray? And his answer to her was, well, I prayed for you. Does that count? So it's showing that slowly but surely Deacon is being led not by, I need you to go to church, I need a godly, but slowly being led by seeing Nia's like, well, we need to pray about this. Well, hold up. Before we do this, we need to pray. No, before we do this, I need to hear from the elders. So it's not per se, boom. It's more at the end of the day, how did they get through? And you realize that undergirded through everything they were going through, prayer and a hedge of protection was around them. In the book later, just one little plot tidbit, Junie, the 12-year-old genius, can audibly hear from God. But he's enslaved. So everyone around him keeps telling him, Junie, what did God say? It is not until the end of the book that Junie recognizes that it is God speaking to him. He will tell them what is being said, but he will never say, God told me. He'll say, he said, it said, they said. But at the end of the book, he said, God said. Now, why is that? Because even though he was a genius, even though God spoke to him, it wasn't until the end of the book, and you'll know why and what transpired in the book, that he finally stood and said, I'm worthy of God speaking to me. Because as a slave, what God's talked to me, I'm being told every day I'm nothing. What God talked to me, y'all saying God talks to me. But what God talked to me, this lowly slave, this one that they put their foot on, this one that gets whooped, this one that I'm going to have to escape. But it's not until he comes to the identity of who he is in God's eyes that he can say, God is speaking to me. And so this is just one character in the book, but this is a very pivotal character. And I wanted people to understand that many times our identity, our feeling of self-worth is part of the issue why we don't believe God is using us.
Guys, that's another gem that Colette, that Colette has dropped.
Bless you.
Do not let your identity of who you are or who other people say that you are prevent you from being who God has called you to be. Because we all have gifts. And he knew he had a gift, but his label was he was a slave. So
That's
he
right.
just could not say that God was speaking to him. And everybody, what did God say? What did God say? But he didn't feel secure enough in himself. And that's the reason why, when we were chatting beforehand, and you named the title, when you said chasing different, fitting in has a price. And it resonated with me because sometimes, Colette, we have to give up who we are. And I'm going to say it a different way, and hopefully I can say it the right so folks will get what I'm trying to say. You give up your blessing. You give up, it's more than your identity. You give up your birthright. You give your
Your
birthright
uniqueness.
away.
Your
Just
uniqueness. Before for Jeremiah 1:5, before he placed you in your mother's womb.
yes.
You give up that special someone he created in your mother's womb, and that he made a gift unto the nation, right? Because we get off track. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, but when you said that, it was like, yes,
No,
yes.
say that you're right because we do get off track, and that sometimes because I'm not going to say it's the world that's taking us off track. Sometimes it's us because I believe we do have free will, but we're pressured because of what the world that we live in. That's that humanness. But we get off track. But your books say you can get back on again. You can get back on track. I was later, and then I started chasing different. And you said this is a series, so I can find my way back, like Abraham and Sarah. They found their way back, and to demonstrate that they were back, Abraham took Isaac up to be slaughtered. I shouldn't say slaughtered, but he would have been slaughtered. But to be offered up as a sacrifice. As a sacrifice. So he found his way back because he could see God fulfill the purpose. I was just too impatient. I didn't believe in me. I knew God could do everything. I thought he knew he could do everything. I didn't think he could do everything in me. I didn't think I was worthy to speak for God because I'm a lowly servant.
And Sarah felt, I'm too old.
Too old.
But my servant is not, right? We have these isms, right? I'm too thin, I'm too fat, I'm too ugly, I'm too pretty, I'm too tall, I'm too short, and so I'm too old, I'm too young. And God is saying, no, I gave you that word and I'm going to fulfill it in you. And we'll get there, or we will get there in a more negative way, which is what happened to them. You try to be God for me, and I'm God all by myself. And so then he had to restructure it and had to show them. And so then their disobedience meant they had to sacrifice. And so Ishmael had to leave. And he loved Isaac, but Ishmael was his son too. And he had to lose Ishmael in order to get back into the presence of God in a good standing, because they were out of order. But I do want to say this part too. It's a trilogy, but they're also standalone. So each book stands alone. There is a recurring story through it, but each person's story ends at the end of that book. And then the second book, Finding Different. And then the third book, Loving Different. And each protagonist in each book is not the norm in society. Yeah.
Well, my final question is for anybody who's in that survival mode, that they're feeling lost. How do I manage it? I've lost my strength. What would you want them to take away from your books and this conversation?
Number one, you don't have to do it alone. And not only is God supernaturally there for you, he said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. But God uses people to bless people. And so there's a community of support waiting for you. There are people who are willing to walk alongside of you. And one of the things that Nia finds out in the book is that there's a community of people that come together to help her. And so, same thing in later. There's a community of people that come together to help Junie and Sarah and John in later. And so there's a community out there for you. And maybe the community that you've presently been around hasn't been, embracing you or forthcoming, but there is a community out there. And many times it can be in your local church. Many times it could be from volunteering. Many times it's in your passion, that's part of your purpose, that you will come across that family that God has given you, whether that is blood family or whether that is a supernatural family.
Well, you have laid out quite a few resources to help that individual who may be experiencing that, Colette. How can the audience stay in contact with you, and how can they get your books?
Well, first of all, of course, Amazon has my book, but my book is wherever books are sold, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, all of those other places. But of course, and when you buy from Amazon in the first 30 days, it helps on where my rating is. And please, if you do read it and love it, and if you read it and you just like it, I don't think anything lower. Come on, y'all guys. Review it, post that. And also I can always be contacted through my website. Thank you. It is ColetteHarrell.com. So ColetteHarrell.com, real easy.
Well, ColetteHarrell.com is how you reach her. ColetteHarrell.com is how you reach her. And Colette, thank you so much for being my guest today on Talk with TAS. This has been truly inspirational. I know that the audience is going to glean lots of nuggets, because I certainly have. And again, all the best to you as you continue doing the work that you're doing. I cannot wait to go back and read later. I'm telling you guys too, you got to get later, because I've heard some stuff about later. Get later, and then I will go into chasing different. But again, it has been my pleasure to have you on Talk with TAS. And until next time, before you go trying to take care of someone, please make sure you take care of yourself first. Bye now.
Bye-bye.